to the things that God has done. Science gives us a better understanding of the ways in which God has worked. Marvelous ways, wonderful ways. Sometimes it's mysterious ways. But there are things that have happened through science that we come to know and understand are because of the hand of God. Turn over to Genesis 1 and verse 1. Genesis 1 and verse 1. Everything on earth is set up for us to live. Everything. The sun's 93 million miles away. If it were a million miles closer or a million miles further away, we'd have trouble here on earth. The moon is 128,000 miles away. That plays an important role in the pulling of the tides. Tide goes in, tide goes out. We see that. The tilt of the earth. I mean, it's tilted just the way it needs to be so that we have seasons. Then we come to see that we have just enough amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide in our atmosphere that you find folks are breathing this morning. And all of these are things that God has brought about. All of these things testify to the understanding that there is a God. I'll say it again, for science is indeed watching God work. Go over to Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, I'm going to interject something here as we go through it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. The darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Science is within that. When God creates, science comes into existence. Okay? Then God said, let there be light. Science. And there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. God at work, science also taking place. Science did not, we're talking about the Bible and science. Science did not precede God. God preceded everything. All things. Genesis 1 and verse 1. In the beginning, God created. He's bringing it. You look nice this morning, brother. You trying to compete with me? You trying to? Oh, man. So we see that God precedes science. From him comes all these things. You know, as I said, the right amount of oxygen in the air, the sun and the moon being at the perfect distance from us. Some would say this: if the universe is expanding, and it is, then it must have had a point of origin. It just goes by saying. And I think we see that in the first book of Genesis, first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Boom. Everything comes into existence. So you can go all the way down to verse 31, and you see God creating and doing these things. Seeds are planted, and so things can grow. Water comes up and waters everything. So all of this has a science aspect to it, and it shows us that God has been working. When I say day one, I mean day one. In the beginning, God created. That's day one. And since day one, science has been in the world. Okay? Now, I know, and we'll look at some of these examples, I know that it took us time and study to discover some of these science facts. At one time, the world didn't know about gravity. It's just the way it is. At one time, the world didn't know how far away the moon was. I mean, we've all lived in a time period where we've known 128,000 miles. We get it. It's nothing to us. It's what you get in freshman science class. And so we know these things that it might have taken us a while to learn, but learn we did. Gene said, I bet there's a lot of things we don't know yet. I agree. I mean, there's got to be a gene floating around out there somewhere that has made me so handsome. I don't know how I caught it, but I caught it. But I would agree. Who knows what the future holds for us when it comes to scientific discoveries. But I know this, God is behind it.
Even the smartest man on earth doesn't know everything.
Oh, I agree.
Like, even Jesus didn't know everything. He didn't know that he was coming back.
A high school freshman with a C in science knows more than what those people knew way back then. And he's just barely passing the class. But our knowledge has been so expanded, so much understanding that we've had, some of it through trial and error. But what I'm saying is that we exist in a world where science is a reality, okay? Science is a reality. But don't think because we have science that somehow it superseded God. And God is therefore bound by science. He's not. He's not. So let's look at some scientific things that give us an understanding that when we talk about the historical Christian record, that we see these things were established, okay? Here's the first one. We'll just go down the list and go through these. Here's the first one. The biblical creation account accurately addresses the seasons and the clock-like precision of the heavenly bodies to measure time. We talked about Genesis there a little bit. Go over to Job. Job chapter 38 and 32. Oh. Job 38. What did I say? 32. Can you bring out the Mazaroth in its seasons? Can you guide the great bear with its cubs? Scientific references to things in the sky. Constellations is what he's talking about. Constellations. There's a scientific understanding of that. That constellations didn't pre-exist God, but we have historical Christian evidences that show us right there in the book of Job that God is the author of the constellations, the things that we see in the sky. They didn't just happen. God brought them about. Let me give you verses 14 and 16 of Genesis 1. Genesis chapter 1, and going down to verse 14. I'm cutting into the middle of it. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on earth." And it was so. You ever seen my parents live out on a farm in Uvalde, Texas. And when the pool lights aren't on, pool lights are so bright they drown everything out. But at night, you can look up and you can see more stars than probably, if you've never gotten out into the nature, you can see more stars. It's amazing. They light up the sky. They give us light. It's just truly amazing. And so we see that God had his hand in bringing those things about. So we accept the historical reliability of the Bible because it's been affirmed. Here's another one. The Bible describes the star clusters called Pleiades as being tightly bound together, whereas the Orion star cluster is described as loose. It was only recently discovered that the star cluster called the Pleiades is gravitationally bound, and that the Orion star cluster is flying apart due to the insufficient gravity to hold the cluster together. So the more time passes, the more it's spreading out. It's getting bigger and bigger. Well, go back to Job. Go back to Job chapter 38. I'm having trouble with my tablet this morning. You weren't playing with it this week, were you? All right, I'll find out. Job 38, beginning in verse 31. Can you bind the cluster of Pleiades or loose the belt of Orion? Wasn't too long ago that we just discovered this, but what is written in the historical record that the cluster of Pleiades is bound. It's not going to expand or go anywhere. While the belt of Orion, it's spreading apart. That was taught to us way back when in the scriptures. When Job wrote these words, it was known to them. How? Science. God is the creator of science. He didn't follow the idea of science. He created science for us. So we see those things. The Bible describes each star as being unique. Go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And notice beginning there and towards the end of the chapter in verse 41, it says, "There is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars. For one star differs from another star in glory." They're separate. They're independent. They have their own shapes. They give out their own certain level of brightness. They're comprised of different levels of rock or gas or whatever, those planets are made of.
They each have their own name.
And they each have their own name. Go over to Psalm 147. Psalms in the Old Testament, right? Psalms 147. And look at verse 4. It says of God, He counts the number of the stars. He calls them all by name. That's what Matthew was talking about. Can you go out, look up into the sky one night and see all those stars. And you're just getting a glimpse of what you can see. You're not getting a glimpse of all. When you look up into the sky, that's not all the stars. I mean, there's so much more. And so what is it? Out of all that number of stars, God calls them by name. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. Certainly amazing to us as a finite creation, I'll tell you that. But you come away and see that the Bible talks about the historical reliability of the Bible and science. Let me give you one more under astronomy. The Bible supports the scientific evidence that the universe is expanding. Go over to Isaiah. And I want you to notice in Isaiah 40, in verse 22, Jack asked me, what's the B for there? I have no idea why it's there. And I typed the outline. Isaiah 40. I'm having trouble with my tablet this morning, guys. Isaiah 40 and Isaiah 40 and verse 22. No, that's wrong. It's Isaiah 40, verse 26, or verse 22. Isaiah 40, verse 22. It is He who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. Man, just picture God okay, I want it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. All right, I want this to go more and more and more. And He simply... And that brought everything into existence. Hey, if we're the creation of a sneeze, man, God is good. And the reminds me of something. The scientific accuracy is amazing how the Bible got it right. Now, I guess I need to say this. That doesn't mean man always agreed with it. I know you got those periods in history where the church, not the Lord's true church, but the church persecuted those who were involved in science. There was a time when man taught that the sun revolves around the earth. And if you disagreed with that, off goes the head. So we certainly understand that God being the creator of science, we understand that doesn't mean that man always agrees with everything when he learns it. But you see that God is that these things are proceeding, or God is proceeding these wonderful things that are taking place. Go over to Jeremiah. You're in Isaiah, one book forward. Jeremiah chapter 51, and what did I give you? Verse 15. He has made the earth by His power. He has established the world by His wisdom and stretched out the heavens by His understanding. If there was a big bang, it was God saying, let there be. Let there be. But there has to be a point of origin. If the universe is expanding, there has to be a point where it all began, where it all started. That point, that reference is God. Any questions or comments?
All four corners of the earth.
Yes.
That's where we walked off the side and fell, right?
Yes, that's right. The four corners of the earth. You can only sail so far.
That reference about that.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. But man, there are some think the earth is flat. Oh, might have some here. I don't know. Yeah. There's a big move. If you go to YouTube and type in flat earth, you can watch all the videos you want to watch on people defending that the earth is flat.
Some odd belief that if you go far enough, you just fall right up the edge.
That's right. That's right. But you begin to see these things. Anybody? Yes, Roberta. Absolutely. Good point. Yeah. Yeah. You must not know much about Lewis. But, because I could count those hairs on his head. I could do it. That's funny. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll get to you next. Brother Joe, I could count his hair. Good comments. Good comments. Let's talk about genetics next. The Bible reflects an understanding of the genetic code needed for the replication of life and the propagation of different species. So your DNA, that genetic code that makes you, go back to Genesis chapter 1. And I'll break it up to a couple verses. The first is verse 11 and 12. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Hold that thought and go over to verse 27. Verse 27, and notice what it says. "For God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Then God blessed them," that's man and woman. "And God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, of the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" So you really have two different things that are being talked about, but they're being talked about in the same way. The first thing that you see in verses 11 through 12 is you see a scientific fact of a seed reproducing after its kind. We call it the seed law principle. Okay? If you plant an apple, what do you get? You don't get cherries, you get apples. That's the seed line principle. Well, that same thing is being talked about man here, the seed line principle. When a woman gives birth, she doesn't give birth to a watermelon. Well, might feel like a watermelon, but she doesn't give birth to a watermelon. She gives birth to a human. Why? The seed line principle. And he talks about that there. God created him in his own, then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth." Seed line principle. Reproduce after your kind. Okay? So you begin to see that these things were taught in science long before we might have discovered them. Now, let's talk about some geology. The Bible describes the earth as a circle, suspended in space, which harmonizes with the earth being a sphere held in place by gravity. And did I give you Job 26 before? It seems familiar to me. Go over to Job chapter 26 and verse 7. He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. Yeah, that was one that we used for another one. Go over to Isaiah 40. Just turn forward. Isaiah 40 and verse 22. It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. So you begin to see that the earth is a sphere. It's a circle. God sits above the circle of the sphere. It's not a box. It's not flat. It's not square. It's not like the Star Trek Borg cube. That's another one only Joseph got. The Borg, they had a ship was a cube. Notice this next one there. Stay there in Isaiah 45. Or go over to Isaiah 45. Verse 18. For thus says the Lord, who created the heavens, who is God, who formed the earth and made it, who has established it, who did not create it in vain, who formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, there is no other. So earth is made to be the place where we live. Okay, now I'm going to say something that's going to be crazy to you, and you're going to say, man, I don't buy that. I think God created earth for the place for man to dwell. That means we ain't going to live on Mars. We ain't going to live on the moon. We're not going to have earth colonies on that Titan, that moon circling around Jupiter. Maybe we'll visit, but we ain't living there long term. God gave us everything that we need on earth. There's a reason you got to wear a spacesuit if you go to Mars. There's a reason they had to wear spacesuits when they walked on the moon. It's not created to be inhabited by man. It's simply not made to fulfill the things that we need. Okay? So you begin to see this, that God made the earth to be inhabited. He formed it just the way he wanted it to be, called it into existence. So I would say that could have modern day applications today. When we're talking about traveling to the stars and doing all these things, well, you better take what you need with you, because you ain't going to find it out there. You want to drink a glass of water on Mars, you better take that water with you. Right? You want to eat on the moon, you better take that food with you. But you see this already being talked thousands of years in the past by the Bible, by science. You see God working, okay? It's perfectly made to inhabit us. You don't wear a spacesuit here. Well, during COVID, I guess we all did, didn't we? You don't wear a spacesuit here because it has everything that we need. Here's a third one, talking about geology. The Bible teaches that a worldwide catastrophic flood took place in the history of the earth that wiped out every living thing. Modern science also teaches that a worldwide catastrophe event took place. So the Bible says it happened. Science says it happened. Go over to Genesis chapter 7. Genesis chapter 7, beginning in verse 20. The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered. Say something about that in a minute. And all the flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every man. So the water proceeded above the tallest mountains, 15 cubits upward. Among the tallest mountains, and everybody I talk to, the first thing they say is, wow, Mount Everest was once flooded. Who says Mount Everest was the tallest mountain? Who says that? The Bible talks about God raising up the land and lowering the land.
Back then there were mountains higher than that.
Yeah, maybe there were mountains higher than that, and they got covered up to that. God has changed the typology of the earth. And He's done that out of his will, out of his desire, what he wants. Was the Mariana Trench always the deepest place on earth? I don't know. I know it is now. But I don't know what happened before the flood or how God decided to reshape the earth. I don't know. Gene, do the rocks bear any type of geological evidence to there being a flood? Yeah. So we see that as being true. So the next thing is meteorology. The Bible accurately describes the hydrologic cycle, which includes evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. So we call it the water cycle. Okay, right? So the earth is self-contained, right? All the water that we have now is all the water we're going to have. There's not water coming from outer space or none of that. It all has to be here now. Okay? And so we come away with the understanding, how could that be brought into existence? Did it just happen? No, it didn't just happen. God's fingerprints are on the hydrological system. Go over to Amos chapter 9. And boy, I'm having trouble with my tablet. Amos chapter 9 and verse 6. He who builds his layers in the sky and has founded his strata in the earth, who calls the waters of the sea and pours them out on the face of the earth. The Lord is his name. Who does all those things? God. Who brought all those things into existence? God. Who controls all those things? God. Remember, God preceded science. The Bible is affirming things that we've later learned. The Bible is affirming those things. Yes.
Ecclesiastes amazes me reading about rivers flowing into the sea. It never overflows.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think the salt level is in there. But that doesn't change either.
Right.
Brother Don, when Galileo was teaching science, he was hushed. He said, "No more of that. We're gonna stop it."
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Scripture makes me think of a certain song in Songbook.
Well, what's that?
Oh, worship the King. One of the verses, it says, "It streams from the hills, it descends to the plain, and sweetly distills in the dew
And the rain. Yeah. What makes the clouds rain? Evaporation from the earth that's on the ground. Evaporation goes up and it rains coming down. It's a fixed cycle. Like I said, you ain't getting water from somewhere else. It's all self-contained right here. I noticed Amos is spelled wrong on there. I think that's the way you spell the cookie, isn't it? Amos's cookies. I think that's the way. Yeah. Go over to Job 36. Go to the book of Psalms, turn backward one book. Job 36, and beginning there in verse 27. For he draws up the drops of water, which distill as rain from the mist, which the clouds drop down and pour abundantly on man. Indeed, can anyone understand the spreading of the clouds, the thunder from his canopy? Not for a while we didn't understand it. Not for a while we knew it. Science was at work, but we didn't understand how science was working. It gives us the understanding that we can rely on the historical record, that we can rely on what the Old Testament, in this case, teaches us, and what the New Testament teaches us. You know, there were things in Scripture from a scientific standpoint that man had to learn maybe the hard way. Lepers. Why did they put lepers outside of the city? Why did lepers have to live? Because leprosy is contagious. And if measures weren't taken to isolate them, then it would just spread through the population. Well, that's a scientific fact. That's a scientific fact.
You can even get leprosy from them by even breathing their air, I believe.
Yeah, one of the animals gives it too. It's not raccoons, is it possums? Armadillo. Armadillo give you leprosy. So you see all these things taking place. And then the next one there, the Bible accurately describes the ocean currents and atmospheric jet streams. So why does the plane that takes off in New York and is flying to Paris, why doesn't it just fly straight across? Why does it go up and then come down? Jet stream. The jet stream. That was talked about long before man figured it out. Go over to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 6. The wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. Right? All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, they return again. Well, of course they do, because they evaporate into the clouds rain, and it goes right back into that river, right back into that lake, right back into the ocean. It's a closed cycle. It's a closed cycle. Well, the Bible talked about this long before man ever figured it out. Here's another one, biology. The Bible asserts that blood carries the life and health of a living being. Go over to Leviticus chapter 17. Third book in your Bible. Leviticus chapter 17, beginning in verse 11. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement for your souls. Go down to verse 14. Why was blood shed? Because blood was the carrier of life. That's why blood was shed. Go over to verse 14. For it is the life of all flesh. Its blood sustains its life. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, you shall not eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is in the blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off, one of their dietary restrictions. Now, Garrett, let me ask you a question. If you go to a scene and they tell you the person's got zero blood left in them, what does that tell you? What condition is that person in? Well, they're dead. They're dead. You can't live without blood. You can't live without blood. I don't think you'd do CPR, would you? There's no blood. There's nothing to circulate. So we see that the Bible talks about this, that there's life in the blood. Well, that was long before man ever discovered that scientific fact. Well, look at germs. It wasn't until the Civil War when all these patients were dying, when doctors operated on them. They're like, what in the world is going on? And then they discovered germs. When you're using that same saw on the last 14 legs that you cut off, you had germs all over that. You were infecting the individuals. They were going to die. But we didn't know about germs until then. You know, washing your hands, what's the big deal? Germs. Germs are the big deal. Okay? And so you see these things that we had to discover over time, but the Bible presented them to us. Okay? The Bible presented them to us. Any questions or comments? Nothing? Y'all are being awful easy on me. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. God instructed them to do those things, and they would. I've always been, and maybe somebody can research it and find out. The Old West was filthy. It was nasty. And you know why women used to carry umbrellas during the day, and it was sunshiny? Is it, well, keep the sun off of them. That's one thing. But people used to throw their waste out of the windows into the street. And so women got to carrying the Deidre's like, that's just gross. Well, I know, but poor Aaron. But they would carry it so when the waste was going out, none of it would sprinkle on them. And then there you have the Romans who created sewers. They created bad water to flow through sewers. What happened in the Old West? Did they just forget that Rome came up with sewers and they didn't put any sewers in? What in the world was going on with that? Germs were spreading and killing people. They had to learn that there's a problem when we live around filth. There's a problem. We get sick, oh yeah, and we die. So those are things that the Bible has talked about long before man was able to put his finger on it and describe it. Zoology. The Bible provides a description of an animal that has similar characteristics to a dinosaur. Okay, the Bible uses, didn't I just get this in a Bible question? Dragons? The Bible uses the phrase dragons. The word, and I get all the time, why isn't dinosaur mentioned in the Bible? Well, dinosaurs are mentioned, but they're not called dinosaurs because the word dinosaur didn't come about to the 1800s. That's why nobody called them dinosaurs, okay? But you see that there are things that are described that man discovered through the fossil record. Man discovered these things through the fossil record. Go over to Job. Chapter 40. Beginning in verse 15. Look now at the behemoth, which I made along with you. Land animals were made on the sixth day. Same as man. Okay? The behemoth which I made along with you. It eats grass like an ox. See now his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. Don't tell me this is an elephant. An elephant's tail doesn't look anything like a cedar. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword. God can control them. God can kill them. God can do what needs to be done with these dinosaurs, these behemoths. Okay? God can do it. Well, we didn't discover dinosaurs until the 1800s. Or 19. If it's 1805, that's the 19th century, right? Yeah. So to the 19th century. And zoology, the mind-body connection. The Bible supports a connection between the mind and the body. I found this interesting. Go over to Proverbs chapter 17. Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 22. A merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the soul. That's the same thing David said when he said, he hid his sins and he was broken down every day. He was weary every day. There was a connection to the weight that was weighing the impact that the sin had upon David in a psychological way. I just feel like I'm being overwhelmed. I feel like I'm being pushed down. Well, that was known long before Freud ever put his fingerprints upon that. And then Proverbs 18 and verse 14. Well, you get the idea. You get the idea. So the historical reliability of the Bible. It's historically reliable when it comes to science. When it comes to science, the Bible supports those things that we came to learn years later. The Bible supports those things. Questions or comments? Yes, Gene. Probably something about this being a good class. Is what? Yes, it's accurate anytime it addresses it. Anybody else? All right, thank you all very much. I'm going to give you